So last week, Karina and I interviewed 5G campaigner Ian Jarvis, and he walked us through the safety concerns with 5G. Many of you have asked for a follow-up video on precisely what you can do to help fight these 5G towers being installed everywhere. So needless to say, it's quite a complex subject, so I'm going to try and give you an overview first, and then I will pass you over to Ian, who will walk you through step by step a few of the things you can do. And also, over the weekend, someone sent me a podcast with Karen Churchill and the legal case they're taking against the Secretary of State for Health and the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Houses and Communities. They're accusing the UK government of failure to enact the European Communications Code, which says there needs to be an exclusion zone of, I think she said 500 metres, whereas the UK standards are saying 50 metres. Apparently there's a man called Leonard Hardell in Sweden who has done the science, and his studies are showing there are negative health effects, which he refers to microwave syndrome, caused from the 5G, and there's very wide-ranging symptoms from fatigue, sleeping problems, nosebleeds, tinnitus, skin problems, all sorts, which disappear completely after 24 hours of moving to somewhere away from the 5G. But just like with the tobacco industry, the dangers were known for decades before they finally did something about it. So the science is in, and it must be considered. So back in August 2019, Public Health England lawyers affirmed the right that people suffering with electrohypersensitivity have the right to protect themselves and have their objections about 5G masks and the small cell sighting taken into account. So their legal case aims to restore this right. Now, before we move on to the information that Ian Jarvis gave us with the procedure he uses to campaign against 5G masks, we're just going to quickly hear from Colchester councillor Andrea Luxford-Vaughan on her experiences of dealing with planning.
At the moment, rarely do they actually need planning permission. They have to do a public consultation, they send that out, you ask them a list of questions, they come back with absolutely nothing, they won't even send you, like the mapping diagrams of the radiation, nothing, they won't give you anything. And what I've found on a personal level is the only way you'll actually make any inroad to stop them being installed is either the disruption to the landscape, as in, if they're putting it in a new area and it's going to, start destroying wildlife or access to it because they need maintaining, will cause problems. That's the ground. And then on a landscape terms, but their hands are tied. And I've talked to officers and they've gone, actually, we can't stop this happening, it's permitted development, and that's where we come across. Right?
So just because local councils are instructed not to turn down 5G on health grounds, it does not absolve them of their liability. Now, the key thing she mentioned was the permitted development. They think their hands are tied. But Ian thinks that isn't the case because there's some rather dodgy goings on, it would appear. Now, in order to get this fast-track prior approval, the companies need to be on the Ofcom register of persons with powers under the Electronic Communications Code. And not all of these companies are. And if they're not on that list, they shouldn't get that fast-track approval. Another thing that Ian's discovered is that these companies are applying using a company name which doesn't exist. It's been dissolved. And also they are self-certificating that they meet the ICNIRP standards, which we covered in the previous video, also with a company that doesn't exist. And this has been going on for nearly a decade. Now, whether that makes them not as liable, who knows why they do it, but anyway, this is being done. So as Ian says, how on earth could you be granting permission for a company that doesn't actually exist? So that's the overview. I'm now going to pass you over to Ian to walk you through exactly how you look for planning applications and what to do once you find one that is going to affect you.
So when you first want to look into a planning application, of course, we're interested in the telecoms one, so that's what we're going to look at. This is what you will first see when you come to your council website. If you click on this, which is your main menu, give you services and information, the planning portal, it's usually referred to, and you can see planning, building control, all fairly obvious. And we've got this search for a planning application. It says search for and comment on planning applications. It says search by address or application number. And if you just come down here, you'll see it's got every planning application. It does say search by street name, experimented, and I put in telecoms. And sure enough, it seemed to work. You can even do a down there and you can view details, or you can just click on this. That takes me to a page that looks like this. And it gives you basically the details. It's the, if you like, you can call it page one. general information in this first page. So the important thing you want to find out is these are all the documents, and you'll see there's what they call the site-specific supplementary information and planning statement. That's one of the most important documents. You can see there's a few more. The first document I look for is the application form. In Colchester, you can't just download them, which is what I like to do, but you can go here. So let's click on the application form because it's useful to look at that first. It's useful to know who the applicant is. It's Cameron Wilson is the name. Cameron actually works for a company called Dot Surveying, which is based in Edinburgh. You'll see the date in a minute. And that's interesting. Remember that name because it says Cameron Wilson is the applicant. Seco Hutchison, that's a company that's okay. On the Stand Up Wolverhampton website, there's a video which will tell you all about these and go into a lot more detail. One of the other important documents is what they call the Declaration of Conformity. And we were talking about that briefly in the last video that we did. So again, you can come here, click on this button here to view that particular document, and you'll see this is what a lot of the fuss has been about. Again, I'll explain all that details in a moment or two, but you can see this form, it's a health and safety form, and it's not got any company information at the top other than that address. So there's no logos, no official address where this is coming from. And if we go down to the bottom, there's no registered office details. So in terms of company legality, it's probably not the best document that you could have. But this is the declaration, and it has to be there with every mast application. And it says that this company declares that the proposed equipment and the installation as detailed is designed to be in full compliance with the requirements. And this is what we call the ICNIR, but the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection company. It is a company registered in Germany that has published a document which gives the UK government details of how it's set its standard, and this is the standard that's that is our standard. We use it. It's the most important document is probably this one, which is, like I said earlier, the SSSI. This is where loads and loads of information is. The main thing is to start reading them, and you will learn a lot. This is the picture of the place on the corner of a roundabout. And this little traffic cone there is where they plan to put this mast. Now, I would immediately start asking questions about that. There might be a visibility issue with it, certainly coming from this direction, looking through there. These things are about 1.5 meters high. So from the height of the car driver's position, you wouldn't be able to see over them. So there may be an issue there. The main issue for me, I think, though, is these trees. There's going to be roots under here from this tree, particularly this big one here, and almost certainly the tree roots will be damaged when they dig up. Now, interestingly, in Wolverhampton, our tree officer did raise that issue with the council very strongly, and he objected one particular one and 2 or 3 since then. About the damage to the trees, not necessarily what you might be thinking of, the radiation affecting the leaves, but from the actual construction of it, so close to where those roots are going to run. So that's one thing that you can look at. That's the only thing I'm going to focus on today. This is a fairly useless map usually, but as you can see, it's quite a long document. In this particular case, 11 pages, so it's not too bad actually, this one. And you notice the agent is now Tom Gallivan. These two men crop up a lot of time on these applications. It's a pretend signature, of course, isn't it? The date there when he did this, and it says the operator is going to be H3G. Now, this company was dissolved in 2014. So how can it possibly be the operator? That's a question. I'll raise that issue in a minute. You've got to work out what you put in. I put in telecoms there. If I were to put in cabinet, which is one that works a lot because all these applications have cabinets around the base, so you can go there. Interestingly for me, that's the one we've just been looking at, Eastwood Roundabout. But the second one is different to when I put in telecoms. This is land at Rye Lane Farm. Choose our words carefully, whatever we put in there. But that's a good look at the Colchester site. And if you look on Braintree and you scroll down, we've immediately got view or comment on planning applications. And they've got a very easy to use search, a keyword there, but also you've got this advanced search, and you can click on that. And this makes the job very easy. And you've got an application type here, so you can click on that. You're always going to find something to do with telecoms. And here we are, we've got telecoms 56-day notification. So we click on that, and that's going to pull up all the telecom applications within a date range. And then we can do a search, and it will simply pull out all the telecoms. So as you see, it's quite a convenient way of searching, more so than Colchester. So I apologise to Colchester residents. Braintree is a better system than Colchester. If we go back to the search page, you can also see that it's very convenient. You can actually do a weekly list. And this, once you've got up to date with your own council, this is the easiest way of doing it. The issue that I mentioned a little while ago, I spoke about some potential legal issues with some of the applications. And you saw me mention in that first one I looked at the issue with the company H3G, which was dissolved in 2014. We also saw this was 3 UK Limited, and 3 UK Limited was dissolved actually in 2015. And they're not the only ones, but it has been very common with applications from Hutchison, which is in common parlance part of the 3 stable. Many of you will have a mobile phone from 3. And it's the same company puts out your mobile phone. So what do we do about that? Well, one thing that I started doing, and several people in council doing, you can actually write a letter to your council. I suggest you write to the CEO, the head of legal, possibly, ideally every single councillor, but at the very least, the planning committee, because there is an issue here. I've actually written a letter for you to send out. Now, if you do stand at Wolverhampton, if you go to this page here, EMF, radiation and 5G, this is what you will see. If you want to make a general inquiry, or you want me to come down to Colchester or to Braintree or to Chelmsford again, you can send an email. We do have another email address here who will help you with any applications that you're struggling with. It's a good idea to get some help with the first one, and they will guide you through it. Please don't send me an email directly. I'm up to my eyes in various things. This letter is available here. It can be downloaded. So the first page is actually giving you advice on actually how you can use the letter itself. You notice here, I do say, please keep the focus on the arguments in that letter, and don't complicate it with anything else. There's a big temptation, I know, and I've seen people do it. Despite me writing this, I've seen people adding other things into their letter. And I think it's the best thing to keep this focus on these arguments that are in the letter, because they are very precise and focused. The thing about general permitted development rights is an issue in itself. When I was made aware of this possibility, I recognized that companies have to be registered on this particular register on the Ofcom website. Now, in order to get that, you have to be on that register, because you have to do 2 or 3 things as well, not just write to them and say, please put me on the register. One of the companies that wasn't on the register when I wrote the first was this company here. This is the top level in this country of the 3 group, Signal Infrastructure UK Limited. It was not on this register, so therefore it should not have been applying for prior approval, which is the fast track system of planning, and it makes it much easier for them and much more difficult for us. And they weren't on it. Once they became aware of it through letters to councils in different places, they immediately put themselves on the register from the 4th of October 2023. So that gave me a clear indication that they knew they were in the wrong, and they had to do that in order to to get it right, which they did. But there are other companies who are not on that register and who are being named as the applicant in the in a planning application. So that's point one. You may not want to cover both of these things when you write. It's up to you. So that's the general permitted development rights. Probably the more important one is this, the declaration of compliance, because not only have they been using 3 UK Limited for this, which you saw on that Colchester one a second ago here. 3 UK Limited declares that the proposed equipment and so on. 3 UK Limited, now you know, doesn't exist. It's a dissolved company, and we've also come across that H3G in that application as well. If you remember rightly, I think on this one, right at the very bottom, it said the operator was H3G. How can a non-existing company be the operator? So that's what this second half of the letter is all about. So what that means in essence for writing that letter, there are those two issues. Many applications have got an ICNIRP certificate, i.e. the declaration which purports to be about health and safety. They have been made in that name, the name of a dissolved, i.e. non-existent company. Feel free to use that, write it to your council. You can include those comments, that application. You can draw their attention to the fact that recently they have approved an application with a non-existent company doing the declaration, 3 UK Limited, and a non-existing company, H3G, as the operator.
So I asked Ian, what happens when you do report these companies to the council? And he said, well, you get a very mixed response. Some just say, oh, well, they obviously meant a different company and that's fine. But others do actually pull them up on it. So, you know, it's going to depend on the integrity of your local council, basically, as to whether they follow this up. And when you consider some councils are so pedantic on some paperwork, Ian told me the story of one councillor who had abbreviated Berkshire down, and they sent it back to him saying they wouldn't accept the abbreviation. Yet when that same councillor raised his concerns over 5G, the safety declarations being done by companies that didn't exist, they just shrugged it off. This is an illegal practice and it should be stopped. So it basically comes down to us, the people, to really pursue our local councils and make sure that they crack down on these companies, because they shouldn't be able to get away with this and doing things illegally. So we're not saying this is easy or foolproof, but at least you're giving them more grounds to turn down these applications. So persistence is key, and the quantity of people. We all need to be haranguing our local councils over this, that we can at least slow it down and have it in as few places as possible while people argue over the science behind it, and demand that we have proper health and safety checks done on this, because we simply do not know what effect this is going to have on our health. The canaries in the cage are the people who already suffer from electro-hypersensitivity. Okay, so we're going to finish it off with a few more tips from Ian on other ways he's managed to get applications refused, and also some advice for those of you that are getting equipment and actually taking readings of the radiation that's coming out from these masks. Is not quite as simple as you might think.
One of the reasons for refusing a couple of masks, as I seem to remember, was given as the residents had a fear being harmed.
Oh, and that worked.
And that worked. That was one of the reasons, not the sole reason, but that. I mean, nobody can say you don't fear harm. Nobody can say you, and several, at least two that I think I could send you the comments they made. Inspectors, you know, when it goes to appeal, it goes to the inspectorate, the planning inspectorate, and a couple of the reports have come back refusing it. Within their report, they say, one used the phrase, not least because of the concern that it might cause parents of children attending the school.
So it seems like concern for your health has more of a clout than actual problem with the health.
Well, it may well do in that context, yeah. There was a case some years ago, Mendip Council, which is Somerset, and that was refused on health grounds. There was a lot of argument in the planning. It went to planning committee, and there was quite a lot of argument about it. And as soon as the chair of the committee announced was to refuse the application and said it included health grounds, the company withdrew. So in that case with Mendip, they wouldn't say we don't want it to be on the record that it was refused on health grounds.
They've agreed planning for something that's meant to be a certain power, and if it's putting out more than the safety recommendations are, surely that's something for them to take action on that people can go to their councils with.
Yeah, you get into a real difficult area here because there are so many problems with that. It's almost impossible for me to win the argument, even if I'm right. The other thing that IGNOP does, it averages out over 6 minutes. Now,
oh, so you've got to take that reading for at least 6 minutes.
Yeah. So you've got to take an average will always have the effect of bringing the overall reading down.
Okay.
They don't take the peaks into account. I mean, what it does prove is that something is beaming radiation over this area from somewhere. If that's what you're trying to show, then great. It will show that, but it will not give you a really solid argument to say it's above the limit of ICNIRP. There are so many arguments that can be put about you. What about your equipment? How many readings did you do? Where did you stand? How good is your equipment? Is your meter capable of isolating a single mast? Now, most of the ones that we have don't, because we can't afford to spend £1 or £2 on it. What the council will do, they'll refer to Ofcom and say, well, Ofcom has taken readings around the country in several sites, which it does do, not often enough, and all their readings are well below, within a few percent. So it's an argument that's so difficult to win. Use the readings that you've got and show them what they are, but don't try and oversell them. I recommend this one. It's by a professor. He died a couple of years ago, actually, unfortunately, Martin Blank. It's called Overpowered.
So the approach that Ian recommends is writing letters to your council with the template that he has compiled, but also it's very worthwhile engaging with the councillors themselves to try and educate them on some of the dangers. So how you go about that is entirely up to you. You can meet with the councillors individually if they're up for that, or you can go in and talk to them at the meetings. So Ian's recommendation is to keep things very simple, very factual, and make it easy for the councillors to get on board with you, rather than giving them too much information, which can be information overload. And also, if you end up telling them a load of things that don't sound plausible, even if they are true, they then immediately assume you're a conspiracy crank, and then they won't listen to anything that you're saying. So try and make your communications as easy as you can for the councillors to be on board with. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they know every last detail, it doesn't matter if they believe what you believe. What's important is getting them stopped. In the last video, I mentioned that Ian is very happy to advise people, and he said he's thinking of doing an East Anglian tour. He's already got a potential date booked for the 12th of March in Southend, and he's been more than happy to come to Colchester or anywhere around this surrounding area. So if you would like him either for a talk for an evening, or he's very happy to do a full day's training on exactly all the processes that you go through step by step, he'll tell you everything that will help you stop these 5G towers being put up. In the description, I'm going to link to the Stand Up Wolverhampton website that has all of the resources that Ian has put together, all the templates, and I'm also going to link to his Buy Me a Coffee link, because he works tirelessly on this, advising people up and down the country. So do please donate and help support the work that he is doing. So I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope you've managed to stay more awake than my co-presenter has. Yes, you. Oh, you are awake. You're going to help me present, are you? Well, you're going to have to sit still if you are. It's not time for walking dogs. It isn't. No, it's not. Just behave yourself.